In early 1943, the Solomon Islands trembled under a sky that almost always belonged to Japan. For months, the American forces and their allies had struggled to challenge the deadly mastery of veteran Japanese aviators who had honed their skill during the long conflict in China and the devastating early victories of the Pacific War. Before the United States could shift the momentum, its pilots in the Solomon Islands fought against overwhelming odds. The Japanese Naval Air Group stationed at the powerful Rabaul fortress operated with confidence born from endless combat experience. Rabaul was not just a base, it acted as the central stronghold of Japanese aerial power in the South Pacific, sending out Zero fighter units that dominated nearly every confrontation. These Zero pilots combined elite training with battlefield intuition, making them a frightening presence over Bougainville, New Georgia, and Guadalcanal. American pilots flying older aircraft, such as the P-40 and the F4U Wildcat, could rarely match the maneuverability and climbing ability of the Japanese Zero. These American aircraft were rugged, but they were slower and less agile, forcing their pilots to rely on teamwork, altitude tactics, and sheer determination. Even so, many engagements opened with Japanese fighters diving out of the sun, attacking with precision and vanishing before the slower American aircraft could respond. The battle for the Solomon Islands became a grinding war of attrition in which Allied aviators often felt outmatched. Searchable keywords like Pacific Air War, Solomon Islands Campaign, and Japanese Zero Advantage emerged in later studies because the situation was so unbalanced. From the jungles below, soldiers watched dogfights unfold overhead and understood that control of the sky determined the survival of entire island garrisons. Each mission from Henderson Field was a struggle to delay Japanese supply convoys and bomber formations launched from Rabaul. Every Allied pilot knew he faced men with years of experience and an aircraft renowned for its deadly combination of range, agility, and firepower. Yet beneath this imbalance, a shift was coming. A new fighter waited in the wings, a machine many believed was too powerful and too unforgiving to tame. Soon the arrival of the F4U Corsair would challenge everything the Japanese believed about their dominance in the Pacific sky. In early 1943, before the year had fully revealed its shifting tides of war, a new silhouette appeared above the battered airstrips of Guadalcanal. As America joined the next phase of the Solomon Islands campaign, the arrival of Marine Squadron VM 120 for flying the F4U Corsair signaled that the air war was about to change. The aircraft was unlike anything the pilots or ground crews at Henderson Field had seen. Its long nose, immense Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, and inverted gull wings made it look more like an experimental prototype than a frontline fighter. The Corsair had already developed a reputation as difficult to handle, especially during carrier landings. Many believed it was too much airplane for young aviators who had only recently finished training. Yet the Marines knew they needed every advantage against the veteran Zero units flying from Rabaul. The unique design of the Corsair was built entirely for performance. The gullwing shape allowed for shorter landing gear while clearing the massive propeller, reducing drag and increasing speed. The huge engine delivered raw power unmatched by any American fighter previously stationed in the Solomon Islands air war. Its 6 heavy machine guns promised a level of firepower that could tear through Japanese aircraft with brutal efficiency. Still, the pilots of VMF 124 felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Many were young and had never faced the Japanese in combat. They listened to stories of Zero agility, high kill ratios, and a reputation of Japanese aviators who had dominated the Pacific since 1941. The new Corsair pilots worked tirelessly to understand their aircraft, studying its strengths and struggling through its quirks. They knew that one mistake during takeoff or landing could end their service before they even saw battle. Searchable keywords such as F4U Corsair Performance, Guadalcanal Aviation, and VMF 120 for Fighter Squadron reflect the growing interest historians later placed on this moment. When the call finally came for their first operational mission, uncertainty hung over Henderson Field like the coastal mist. Nobody knew if the Corsair would live up to its promise or it would prove too complex for inexperienced pilots under fire. All that was certain was that the next mission would determine whether this radical machine could stand against the legendary Zero. In October 1943, as air warfare was evolving across the Pacific, the moment arrived that would define the reputation of the F4U Corsair. On February 12, 1943, the Marines of VM-120 were launched to escort a vulnerable Catalina rescue aircraft operating near Vella Lavella. The mission seemed routine at first, yet every pilot understood that Japanese fighters from Rabaul could appear without warning. The skies above the Solomon Islands held tension so thick that even veteran observers recalled the way silence often preceded deadly encounters. As the Corsairs climbed to their escort position, enemy Zero fighters were already rising from distant airfields. Many of these Japanese aviators were seasoned men who had survived the intense early battles of the Pacific and brought with them expertise unmatched by most newly trained American pilots. The Japanese expected to find P-40 or F-4F aircraft that they could outmaneuver with familiar ease. They had never seen the Corsair in combat and believed that the new American fighter was simply another machine to be broken apart by the agility and precision of the Zero. Instead, they found an aircraft that shattered every assumption. When the Zero formation approached from above, the Corsair pilots refused to turn into a traditional dogfight. They pushed their massive engines into steep dives and used their superior acceleration to dictate the fight vertically instead of horizontally. The sky erupted as the first bursts from 6 Browning machine guns opened fire. Japanese pilots were shocked at the speed with which the Corsairs climbed back upward, roaring past them with power the Zero could never match. What had begun as an anticipated interception became a brief and devastating lesson in changing technology. Several Zeros fell in the first moments of the engagement, struck by concentrated fire that tore through wings and fuselages with brutal force. Searchable keywords like Vella Lavella dogfight, Corsair combat tactics, and Japanese Zero shock later appeared in military studies because this battle demonstrated a clear shift in air superiority. The engagement lasted only minutes, yet it proved that the Corsair could outrun, outclimb, and outgun the most experienced fighters Japan could put into the air when flown with disciplined energy fighting tactics. For the first time in the Solomon Islands air war, the Zero had met an opponent that excelled in the vertical plane and punished any attempt to follow. In the late months of 1943, before Japan could recover from earlier losses in the Solomon Islands, the reports arriving at Rabaul carried a tone of alarm unfamiliar to Japanese intelligence officers. As the American forces expanded operations across the island chain, veteran Japanese pilots began to describe encounters with a new fighter that behaved unlike anything they had previously faced. These men, many of whom had flown since the conflict in China, were not prone to exaggeration. Their testimony made it clear that the F4U Corsair had changed the Pacific Air War. The Japanese Naval Command gathered every detail they could from the survivors of the Vella Lavella engagement. The Zero had long been respected for its exceptional agility and climb rate, qualities that had dominated the early Pacific campaigns. Yet the Corsair demonstrated speed and vertical performance that reversed these long-standing advantages. Japanese pilots reported that the American fighters no longer attempted to outturn them. Instead, the Corsairs simply climbed away or dove with such force that the Zero could not match their momentum. This realization struck at the core of Japanese aerial doctrine. For years, their pilots had relied on horizontal maneuvering and tight turning tactics. The introduction of a fighter that excelled in the vertical plane forced them to reconsider everything they believed about air superiority in the Pacific. Rabaul intelligence officers also noted that the Corsair possessed heavy firepower capable of destroying a Zero with a brief burst. The psychological impact of this new threat spread quickly. Even elite aviators understood that every engagement now carried a greater risk. Searchable keywords like Rabaul Air Command, Pacific Turning Point, and F4U Corsair dominance appear in later research because this moment marked an irreversible shift. As the months passed, the Corsair continued to support American operations across the Solomon Islands, escorting bombers, intercepting raids, and maintaining relentless pressure on Japanese bases. Each mission resulted in more losses for Japan, losses they could not replace. The veteran corps that had once given the Zero its fearsome edge diminished with every encounter. This erosion of elite pilots weakened Japan's overall air strength and opened the door to Allied advancement throughout 1943. The Corsair had not only challenged the Zero, it had reshaped the balance of power in the South Pacific and signaled the beginning of Japan's gradual loss of aerial control.